Well, what do we have here? It looks like a fresh leak. It is a fresh leak on the X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Capcom cabinets. And namely, we're getting a new PCB, boys. Getting a new upgraded PCB. I don't know if this will be the standard going forward for Arcade1ups or if they just busted this out because some of these games are harder to emulate. I'm not sure. But let's look through these photos. Now, thanks for watching, Unqualified Critics. If you enjoy the channel, hit that sub button if you would. You don't have to do that, but it would be super helpful. One of the things YouTube looks at is the number of people who watch who are subscribed versus unsubscribed. And if you're a sub, then it's going to help push the video forward. So if you do want to keep up to date on home arcades, hit that sub button. This is a fresh leak, and it shows us an all-new PCB. I think I've never seen this PCB, and I'm going to show you the PCB from NBA Jam by comparison, which used the same old PCB we're used to. And it has some new hardware. This is a heat shield is what this looks like to me. And before they've used a heat sink. I don't know why you would want a heat shield over a heat sink, but maybe some of you in the comments are going to be able to provide some insight here. If you keep going through the photos, you see this is the LCD panel and the LCD driver board, which is going to basically run the monitor and control the brightness and all of that. This looks standard. This doesn't look changed at all. By the way, if you guys ever want to open up this LCD, and there's not really a good reason to unless you don't like the brightness. So like the early Gen 1 cabs, you could buy a replacement board here off eBay. Somebody makes these. I did a review for it a while ago. It works really well, and it gives you a dial to reduce the brightness, which was a godsend for those early cabs, especially the early Namco cabs that just looked like junk because the brightness was turned up too high. Not really an issue with the modern monitors that they're using, but these are really hard to get off because these screws are very small. I fought with this thing like hell. So when I see this here, I'm getting flashbacks. I don't know what this is. This looks like it's the other side of it. And I'm not certain what this is. I think it might be the backlight or the light box light. I'm not really sure. Almost looks like a, yeah, I don't know. You guys can let me know in the comments if you know what this is. Underside of the control panel, we've all seen this before. It did a good job with the color on the buttons. The buttons look really good. But will this be the usual Arcade1up quality, or have they upgraded and it's getting a little more into an At Games level quality? We know it's not going to be Sanwa or HAP or IL or whatever. It's going to be the real feel stuff, which I don't feel is good enough. But they upgraded the PCB. There's always a possibility that this joystick, these buttons are better. And we just have to wait and find out. Button encoder board. This I assume is related to the power, but I don't know. This is clearly something that's opened up that I've never seen opened up before. And then this is the back of the monitor, so you get the standard monitor that we've got everywhere else. It's got the new narrower ribbon cable. I always wondered why they put this little weight in the ribbon cable. I'm not sure why that is. It's got the Wi-Fi antenna, which is identical to the hardware we get in NBA Jam. So with their Wi-Fi antenna, from what I understand, it does not support the latest Wi-Fi protocols, but it's good enough. Let's see, is there a... You know what I'm not seeing? Well, unless that's a micro USB. Power, light. This has to be the audio. So is there a micro USB next to the power? So the antenna's up here. So yes, it looks like there is. This looks like a micro USB. So even with this new board, you should be able to use that trick where you use a micro USB to Ethernet, which does work. And then you can get Ethernet to the board. So I would assume this is live. I would assume this works. And I would assume that's a micro USB. That's what it looks like to me from this photo. And it's placed in the right location for it. Oh, here's a better photo of the board with that weird heat shield on here. I don't understand why you do a heat shield. So let's look at the NBA Jam that I had pulled up. This has a heat sink. That's what this little white box is. And that makes sense to me. You're going to disperse the heat from the main CPU. Oh, a heat shield, as I understand it. And look, guys, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I dabble in this stuff. But I have a pretty substantial PC. I've got a 2080 graphics card, which is soon to be obsolete thanks to the 3000 series. You gotta love PC gaming. But that 2080 graphics card pushes a lot of heat, and it blows it actually right over my hard drive. It's not actually a hard drive, it's a NVMe M.2 SSD, the really fast storage. It's like a little card. It looks like RAM, and it slots right under my graphics card. So I'm looking at potentially putting a heat shield over that, so when the graphics card blows its air over it, it's protected. That's the beginning and end of my understanding of heat shields. But I just find this curious because where's the heat going to come from? I mean, the heat's going to come from this board. So why? What are you shielding? Are you shielding it from itself? I mean, I totally might be misunderstanding something here. So I'm not saying this is definitive. If you know, put it in the comments. But other than the monitors, the only other thing in this arcade that could be blowing out heat, and that's not very much. So why would you do a heat shield here and not a sink? That's to me, that's what's curious. Also, if you guys know anything about this board, let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. Anything stand out to you here? And again, for comparison's sake, here's the old board that we were using as of NBA Jam. It definitely looks more substantial, but I couldn't tell you what the differences are. And I'm not seeing the name of the board manufacturer here. All right, well, let's look at the instruction manual. It's mostly in French for some reason. Not a lot of new here to look at, but you will notice that they show the cabinet without a riser in one of the photos. I don't know if they plan to sell this in those countries without a riser, and maybe that's the news, is that this will be sold in France. You know, we all know that Europe has fallen short with Arcade1up distribution. Maybe we can expect this in France. Spanish is curious. I don't know if that's just for the Spanish-speaking population in the US or if they're actually going to distribute this to Mexico. Hopefully this is going to France and Mexico and then far beyond, because we know that the international distribution just hasn't really been there before. I also wonder if this more substantial heatsink is going to be the standard going forward, or if this is just here because they are emulating a Super Nintendo game. That's a possibility. Now, the arcade games that they're emulating on this list, let's take a look. These are CPS2 games. X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom 1. Those are CPS2. And they've done a CPS2 game before. They did it with 1944, The Loop Master, which was on the old Capcom 12-in-1. I think it might have been on the Final Fight cabinet too, I'm not certain. But I know it was on the 12-in-1, I have it. And that cabinet uses the old school PCB, but it emulates the game very well. Runs smooth, no problem. Played that game for hours, never had an issue. So I guess what I'm wondering, I think the questions here are, what's new about the PCB and why? Why switch to a new PCB? Will this be the standard going forward? That's the information we have right now. If any other information drops on this, I'll let you guys know. If you enjoy the video, hit that subscribe button. I'll talk to you later.